The air exploded with sounds that had nothing to do with storms. Shells crashed into sand, rattling the hangar walls like something trying to break through. Alarms screamed, voices crackled over radios. Everything smelled like metal mixed with dirt. Workers yelled over each other, pulling fuel hoses, dropping for safety. Then a voice pierced through the noise, urgent and frightened, cutting through all the chaos. Is there any Apache pilot anywhere on this base? Nothing. Every tool stopped moving. Heads turned toward the speakers, sweat running down into eyes opened wide. Outside, another blast shook the ground. For one long moment, nobody moved. Then one voice rose above everything else. I'm able to fly it. Everyone's heads whipped around. The soldier, who'd spent her entire career repairing helicopters, had just offered to pilot one. Would the commanders believe in her, or let everyone perish while they waited? Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button for military and veteran stories, so these real stories of bravery keep coming your way. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from right now. Sergeant Amelia Parker never wanted the spotlight. Standing just 5'4", she disappeared into the sea of uniforms and engine smoke. Her fingers were always dark with oil, her hair hidden under a stained cap soaked with sweat. Most of the time, she talked more to machinery than human, but every screw she fastened, every engine she fixed carried the same silent beat, the rhythm of an unspoken vow. Many years earlier, a younger version of her sat on the floor next to an Air Force training machine, watching her father, Captain Daniel Parker, handle the controls with the ease of someone made for the sky. He'd let her touch the controls once, moving her small hands as the fake horizon straightened on the bright screen. The sky, he'd whispered, is the only place where true freedom exists. When the accident happened, mechanical failure, too close to the ground, nobody survived. That freedom vanished with him. Mia was 12 years old. At 18, she followed his footsteps right into pilot training. She passed every test, every flight exercise, until one measurement stopped everything. 3/4 of a diopter weak in her left eye. Rejected. That rejection letter felt like it tore through her, but she refused to give up. If flying isn't possible for me, she promised herself, I'll keep the aircraft flying. And that's exactly what she did. For years, she practically lived in hangars. Tool in one hand, coffee in the other, sweat burning her eyes under harsh white lights. Every motor that roared to life again felt like her father was breathing once more. Still, after every work period, when the base went dark and footsteps disappeared, she'd sneak to Bay 4, where an aging flight trainer sat forgotten. She'd switch it on, its old fans groaning awake, monitors glowing pale blue. There she'd train for hours, moving through invisible clouds with rough hands, repeating to herself the same words every single night. For Dad who soared, so I could hope. Explosions tore through the early morning air, rattling every structure at forward operating base. Hawk's Nest. Everything shook from the force. Dirt and debris mixed into chaos made of sound and destruction. 2 Apaches sat destroyed on the runway, dark smoke rising into the air. Only one helicopter remained undamaged, the exact one that Sergeant Amelia Parker had worked on through the entire night. The hangar lights blinked. Workers dropped as another shell hit close by, the space thick with powder and terror. Then the doors flew open. The lieutenant colonel rushed in, face marked with ash, voice hoarse with desperation. We need support from above. Is there any Apache pilot anywhere on base? Silence. Just noise on the radio, and the quiet whistle of wind through the hangar's steel frame. Mia's gaze fixed on the helicopter. Her helicopter. She sensed the energy in her chest, the recognizable sound of a machine ready for action. Her hands shook, but not because she was scared. Sir, she spoke, her tone unwavering. I'm able to fly it. Those words struck the room like bullets. Tools went silent. Everyone turned. The colonel looked at her like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. You work on maintenance, he stated carefully. You don't have flight certification. She looked directly at him. No, sir, but I understand this machine better than anyone present. I assembled her. I can keep her operational. Outside, another explosion sent vibrations through the ground. The colonel paused, caught between procedure and reality. The regulations screamed no. The battle outside demanded action now. He glanced toward the flaming skyline, then returned to her, his expression hardening. Get that thing in the air, Sergeant, he commanded, voice quiet but firm. That's a direct order. Mia didn't hesitate. She snatched her helmet, ran through the haze, and vanished into the thunder of the engines she'd only maintained before. Mia raced through the smoke, her footsteps hammering on burned pavement. The atmosphere wavered with temperature and particles, warnings screaming above the noise of faraway gunfire. Apache 734 rose before her, the machine she'd constructed with her own 2 hands, shining under the pulse of emergency lighting. She jumped onto the weapon mount, slipped into the pilot seat, and moved like this was always her place. Controls, fuel connections, armament panels, every action fluid. Confident, she had no need for instructions. The arrangement existed in her memory. The scent of fluid and scorched steel filled the tight space as she pulled from her jacket pocket, unfolding a worn picture. Her father, Captain Daniel Parker, grinning next to a Huey. She attached it over the height gauge. For Dad, who soared so I could hope. Her hands swept across the panel. Backup power engaged. Engines started spinning, growing into a low metallic thunder. The blades began turning quicker and quicker until they became a silver ring overhead. The shaking rattled her headgear, but her pulse remained even. She'd known this sound her whole existence. It meant having a mission. Through the headset came the colonel's words, strained with doubt. Mechanic or not, you're our single option for air backup. Identification, Grease 1. Mia's left hand grabbed the flight stick. The controls heated under her grip. Understood, Hawk's Nest, she responded, tone steady despite the trembling in the atmosphere. Grease 1. Taking off. The hangar burst with wind pressure. As the Apache climbed, dirt spinning in angry circles beneath it. Workers covered their eyes, staring in shocked quiet, as the woman who used to secure their fasteners now lifted their survival. The wasteland sky blazed amber overhead. A tempest of ash, flame and magnificence, as Sergeant Amelia Parker, the technician who shouldn't be airborne, claimed the heavens with her grasp. The blade rhythm was percussion in my core, a constant, unyielding thump, matching the beat behind my temple. The wasteland beneath looked like a streak of tan and warmth. The edge a shimmering boundary, where smoke and daylight clashed. My grip held the flight control like an oath, joints pale under the covering. Every gauge hummed with energy. Every alert indicator posed a riddle I couldn't solve yet. Air in, air out. Allow the systems to communicate and obey. I spotted the convoy before the weapon targeting drew its light green squares on the display. 5 trucks in a messy formation, powder trails, flowing like torn fabric. The first vehicle had mounted weaponry. The next one showed a higher shape, suggesting mortars. They traveled quicker than intelligence suggested they would. Through the headset, someone who'd remained earthbound too long cursed in cut transmission. They're breaking our defenses. 28 soldiers, trapped at coordinates 0, 4, 5. Grease 1. Can you see them? Activating the rocket pods felt like finding my center. The targeting stabilized, the marker narrowed, and my trigger finger waited. Everything decelerated. I recall Dad in a section of my thought, how he grinned without revealing his teeth when circumstances aligned perfectly. I pressed once. The projectile launched like a furious meteor, a pale streak ending in an eruption of fire. The front vehicle exploded into twisted burning sculpture. I sensed the aircraft respond beneath me like something alive and satisfied. The radio burst with yelling, "Perfect strike, Grease 1, perfect strike. Can you track the others?" I tracked them. I swung around low and aggressive. The Apache responding to every tiny adjustment, as though we'd rehearsed this in darkness together. The 30mm unleashed fire that tore at the final truck's side until it toppled and stopped. For one beat, existence was only the sound of triumph and the brilliant rapid bursts of tracer rounds. Soldiers below began celebrating through the static, voices rough with gratitude. Grease 1, you're rescuing our people. I let that surge through me like power and pressed for the following attack. Then the warning I'd only trained for in imaginary exercises. Missile tracking. The alert was a sharp climbing wail that pushed ice down my back. My hands reacted before my thoughts completed. Defensive measures, sharp right flare, release. The Apache jerked. I glinched through the edge as a bright flare curved away, and the missile struck the decoy, exploding in a choking cloud, 50 meters behind our tail. The pressure wave rolled through the structure and made the display flicker. Indicators flashed yellow, then crimson. Something moaned in the body. Grease 1, you're trailing smoke status report. The colonel insisted, his words, a stretched cable. I shifted my focus to the rear gauges. Rotations per minute wavered like an injured pole. A scraping sound came from the tail rotor system. Shrapnel, tiny, vicious fragments had damaged the mechanism. I had moments, possibly. The readings looked like a countdown to failure. Command's response was immediate and absolute. Come back to base, right now. That's an order. Nobody discusses the structure of defiance. It's more silent than expected. It's not a yell, but rather a quiet, determined sound that develops strength. My answer came thin and firm. Negative, sir. If I don't complete this, those soldiers won't survive. Static crackle. I could sense the pressure of countless rules pushing through the connection. But beyond, the convoy was regrouping and starting to escape. I calculated in one quick breath and concluded that regulations were for when systems function properly. This wasn't one of those moments. I executed one additional run. The aircraft trembled under each instruction as the rear control gradually lost responsiveness. I aligned as well as possible, steadied the display, and allowed the cannon to carve a covering path while the rockets eliminated the remaining target. 2 more hits, 2 more explosions, dust clouds, where motors used to exist. The radio exploded like voices of rescued soldiers. Enemy retreating. They're withdrawing. Grease 1 destroyed the convoy. The journey back was prayer through tiny, exact movement. Every adjustment required greater effort. Every directional input felt like pushing against resistance. The rear alerts changed from yellow to a constant red pulse. I maintained the velocity low, maintained the angle up, and made the machine perform the task we could both still handle. The wasteland passed underneath, and the base expanded into a collection of shelters and scorched brush. I descended the approach as smoothly as possible, but the aircraft refused to touch ground softly. We landed hard enough to jar my skeleton. The landing gear bounced, the structure screamed, and then the Apache rested with a cough and a gradual slowdown. For one suspended instant, no sound existed, except the ringing in my head. Then the hangar entrance opened like freedom, and the base surged forward in one thunderous wave of noise. Celebrations, shouts, yells, boots running. Soldiers rushed, some weeping, some laughing, some just staggering toward the steel that had returned them. The colonel approached, breathing hard, expression unreadable beneath powder. He halted before me, every instant stretched tight. He could have spoken anything. Instead, he stared directly at me, and his arms rose with the exactness of someone who'd learned to weigh outcomes. He saluted. Around us, the chanting grew and expanded. Grease 1, Grease 1. I allowed the rush to drain from my body and listened to the sounds of people who'd been pulled back from disaster. My mouth tasted like ash and powder, and a ghost of my father's coffee. I touched the picture in my jacket without thinking, and murmured just under my breath. We accomplished. The colonel was first to approach her. The rotors were still slowing when his outline appeared across the cockpit. His expression revealed nothing. No fury, no comfort, just the mysterious burden of leadership. She climbed from the ladder, boots striking ground hard enough to shake through her legs. He positioned himself close enough for her to notice the ash marking his face. Sergeant Parker, he stated, tone level, every word shaped by order. You disobeyed a direct command. A breath's length of quiet extended between them, the entire base watching. Then his tone shifted, softer, but slicing through the commotion. And you rescued 44 lives. He saluted. For one moment, she couldn't react. Then the noise grew, a thunder rising from the gathering of soldiers, technicians, medics. Grease 1, Grease 1. They yelled until the atmosphere itself vibrated. She simply nodded once, too drained to grin. By morning, the documentation was already moving up the leadership chain. Within days, Pentagon attorneys and examiners came, posing the same inquiries from every perspective. They needed to understand how a maintenance sergeant had piloted an Apache during battle. They watched her helmet camera recording in a plane conference room, replayed it, paused it, examined every technique. One experienced pilot, gray hair at his head sides, relaxed after the footage finished. His words were quiet but definite. She piloted like someone who's been practicing for years, he remarked. That rear stabilizer recovery was textbook under stress. Weeks afterward, the judgment arrived. No discipline, no criticism. Instead, a medal for bravery and an official pilot recognition. Call sign. Grease 1. entered into the formal army documentation. When they presented her the certificate, the colonel who'd once questioned her looked at her again. "Sergeant Parker," he stated, allowing the words to rest like a medal in the atmosphere. "Your father would have felt proud." She swallowed the thickness in her throat and managed one answer. "Thank you, sir." Beyond the glass, the sun caught the fading ash on the skyline. For the first time since the assault, the sky appeared large enough to inhale. 6 months afterward, the combat area had transformed into a learning space. The noise of blasts had been substituted by the hum of ventilation and the occasional creak of aged furniture. At Fort Rucker, Alabama, Sergeant Amelia Parker stood before a room filled with young technicians, expressions new, eyes alert, hands still unmarked by years of grease and wear. On the board behind her, sketches of blade systems and flight procedures covered the area. But today's instruction wasn't about power limits or motor sequences. Today concerned something deeper. "Regulations preserve us," she stated, her words steady but kind. "But when disorder arrives, and the manual provides no solutions, that's when integrity determines who rises up." A wave of quiet followed. One student, barely 20, raised his arm, eyes unsure. "Sergeant," he questioned, "what if we rise up and we don't succeed?" Nia stopped, the question reaching deep. Then she grinned, the type of peaceful grin that arrives from having already witnessed the harshest and survived it. "Then you don't succeed," she responded gently, "but at least you attempt. The only thing more terrible than not succeeding is observing others collapse because you were too frightened to act." The class remained silent for a beat. The atmosphere felt denser, as though every trainee grasped that her statements weren't concepts, they were reality. At the room's rear, Lieutenant Colonel Whitman observed in quiet. The same person who had previously commanded her into the air now managed the new Crisis Flight Operations Initiative, designed to prepare technicians for emergency flight situations. He'd confessed to her once over terrible coffee and better recollections. "When I commanded you to fly that morning, Parker, I believed I was ordering your execution." She'd grinned then, identical to now, and replied, "So did I." Now, as the students departed, Whitman caught her gaze across the space. No statements, just a brief serious salute, the type exchanged between two individuals who had both risked everything and gained something beyond awards. Beyond, the breeze carried the distant pulse of faraway rotor sounds. Nia glanced up automatically, a technician's habit combined with a pilot's yearning. The sky still remained hers. The late afternoon glow poured through the corridor at Fort Rucker, covering the shined ground in amber. The camera traveled slowly, almost respectfully, across a glass showcase built into the structure. Within were two flight insignias, one aged, one brilliant. The first, Captain D. Parker, fly safe. The second, Sergeant A. Parker, grease one. Between them lay a faded picture of a man and his daughter beside an old Huey, both grinning into a sun no longer present. Below the showcase, carved into a brass marker, were 7 straightforward words that held the importance of everything she had existed for. She repaired the bird, then piloted it. The camera remained there, the peaceful hum of faraway rotor sounds, resonating through the passage. Then the narrator's words dropped, peaceful and proud. "Heroes aren't always those with insignias. Sometimes they're those who constructed them." A murmur almost disappeared in the stillness. "We're soaring, Dad. We're finally soaring. If you think bravery means rising up when nobody else does, salute in the comments. And remember to subscribe to Military Veteran Stories for more genuine accounts of courage, devotion, and spirit, because certain stories merit recognition."